When you dream of a corridor that turns back on itself, when the walls breathe and the way ahead narrows to a thread, do you ever wonder if someone is measuring you, not by your strength, but by your patience? The labyrinth is older than our stories about it. It is an arrangement of space that knows how to talk to fear. It does not shout. It leads you in a single winding sentence until you realize the subject is you. Before it became a metaphor for complex choices, the labyrinth was a place. Or at least, people swore it was. The Greek word labyrinthos echoes with labris, the double axe carved into Minoan pillars and painted into frescoes. On the island of Crete, in a palace with steps like spilled honey, the Minoan builders left the marks of ritual and power, and later generations said this was the house of the labris, the labyrinth. In that story, a king named Minos could not untangle a promise from a hunger. His wife bore a bull-headed child, and in a stone belly of passages, Minos hid the secret he could not kill. The monster was not in the center so much as the center was defined by it. Theseus walks into that memory holding a thread. The tale is simple and terrible. Youths sail as tribute to a creature, and a city bleeds its future into the tides. A foreign prince arrives, supported by a promise from Ariadne, the king's daughter, who insists on a line back out for him. The Minotaur is slain. The labyrinth is undone not by brute force, but by a slender solution. The thread is a quiet insult to stone. It says, "Your problem is only impressive when I forget how I got here." So the hero ties a thought at the door and lets it trail behind him. And this simple act turns a myth of punishment into a manual for escape. Historians, with cooler eyes, step inside the word and ask what was real. The palace at Knossos is a maze of rooms and stairways, a model of planned confusion. Perhaps the labyrinth was the palace itself, seen through foreign fear, its bull-leaping ceremonies stitched into rumor until what was ritual became monstrous. Herodotus, the hungry collector of legends, claimed an even greater labyrinth in Egypt, near Crocodilopolis. 1,000 rooms for the gods and kings, more wondrous than the pyramids. He writes as if the structure swallowed him whole, and you can hear in his voice that particular intoxication of a human walking into space designed to disorient. And yet the labyrinth refuses to belong to one shore. Antiquity drew it on coins and mosaics, a perfect brainfold of lines calling itself the world's oldest game. Roman floors set Theseus at the center, frozen in victory or prelude, a reminder that conquest often means learning to read the floor plan. On windswept coasts of the Baltic and the White Sea, fishermen laid out stone labyrinths named Troy towns, Troyaborgs, labyrinths of piled rock like petrified sea spirals. Some believed you could walk a spirit into one, lose it, and walk out clean. One path in, one path out, but the stones kept the mischief circling in your wake. Across an ocean, in the southwest deserts of what is now the United States, the Tohono O'odham and Akimel O'odham wove a symbol into baskets, a human figure at the threshold of a winding path. The man in the maze does not try to trick you. He stands at the beginning as if to say, this is life. Every turn is an age, every curve a decision, and at the center the sun or an enlightenment waits with the weight of both reward and farewell. Here the labyrinth is not punishment or trap. It is the anatomy of a life in one unbroken line. And when the weaving is done, the maker leaves a small, intentional flaw, a reminder that perfection is a wall without a door. Medieval builders carried the pattern into the stone bones of Europe. In Chartres Cathedral, an 11-circuit labyrinth unfurls across the nave like a circular pilgrimage compressed into an afternoon. When travel to Jerusalem became too dangerous, too costly, too political, pilgrims walked the labyrinth as a symbolic substitution. On their knees or with silent steps, they moved through the path as prayer. A single route with 1,000 moments, the mind learning that arrival is not the only way to be transformed. In other cathedrals, the labyrinth hosted playful rituals as well, springtime dances that spiraled like laughter. The symbol contains both penitence and playfulness because it has room for the human to move. There is a crucial distinction here, quiet but fierce. A labyrinth is not a maze. A maze multiplies choice, offers dead ends, mimics confusion with a forked tongue. A labyrinth has one path that leads inward and the same path to lead you out. Where a maze tests your intellect, a labyrinth tests your attention. Where a maze tries to reduce you to a rate of failure, the labyrinth offers you a rate of breath. The difference changes everything about how we use these places, real or imagined, to read ourselves. The dramatic story that most listeners know, Theseus and the Minotaur, is shaped by politics as much as awe. The tribute of youths, the shipping of grief across water, the pride of a city bullied into obedience. The myth is a stage for power. In this light, the labyrinth is not a mystic riddle, but a system designed to hide the costs of ruling. The monster is a stain, public but unspoken, tolerated so that order can pretend not to see its reflection. When Theseus enters, his blade is not merely against the beast, but against the process that kept it fed. Ariadne's thread, then, is a revolution in miniature. It is the knowledge that frees a people, knowledge of where you are and how to go home. If this sounds familiar, it is because so many of our modern labyrinths are not built of stone, but of policies. We do not always need a hero with a sword. Sometimes we need a thread. Mystics approached the winding path differently. For them, the labyrinth could be a portable sacred mountain, a mandala you could walk. In an age when the map of the world felt like a bruise, labyrinths were medicine that let the soul travel without leaving home. Monks walked its turns like syllables in an unending word, winding toward a center they named God or silence. Pilgrims turned inward, and in that turning, learned to carry their own Jerusalem in their ribcage. This is not proselytizing, it is description. The labyrinth allows for reverence without demanding it. Its theology is architectural. Move carefully, and you will come to the center. Move carefully, and you will return. Faith expressed without a sermon. Philosophers and poets set their own ambushes inside the labyrinth. For Borges, the labyrinth is infinite, or worse, it repeats. He writes and rewrites the idea until you realize the library itself is a labyrinth of signs that cannot be escaped by reading faster. The Enlightenment had its own labyrinths of reason, equations spiraling until the proof exhausted you. Nietzsche saw that the labyrinth's core could be a question instead of an answer. And to love the labyrinth is to love the search. Psychoanalysis later used the metaphor for the mind. Jung, deeper into myth, understood Ariadne as a figure of the anima, the soul image that guides the hero out of the unconscious. The Minotaur becomes the shadow, the composite of the parts we deny. A walk toward it is not a hunt, but a negotiation with what we would rather disown. The thread is the trace of consciousness, the part of us that returns home not by denying the shadow, but by acknowledging it and still choosing the path. Archaeology provides its own plain-spoken insight, without romance and without contempt. The design we call the classical labyrinth, with its 7 circuits, is found on rocks and pottery across continents. Some shapes prefer to be remembered. The Chartres style, more elaborate, with 11 circuits and a rosette center, appears much later. Between these patterns lies a conversation of centuries. Mariners may have traced labyrinths to banish bad weather. Herdsmen drew them to confuse wolves and amuse children. Priests incorporated them into liturgy. None of these uses exclude another. A symbol that survives this long does so by letting itself be repurposed without losing its skeleton. Modernity finds the labyrinth too. It has not outgrown the dark. It carries the pattern into films where the moral is the map. The hedge maze at the Overlook Hotel in The Shining is a cold green mouth that eats fatherhood alive. In Pan's Labyrinth, the turnings are memory and trauma. The monsters outside wear uniforms. Westworld draws a labyrinth not to be solved, but to be experienced, the center being a consciousness rather than a destination. The 1986 film Labyrinth literalizes the myth with glitter and menace, reminding us that adolescence is a puzzle house where names and faces change rooms overnight. Video games convert the trope into levels and boss rooms, teaching whole generations to see progress as spirals rather than ladders. Meanwhile, design and corporate architecture borrow the maze for gentler purposes. Hospitals and parks build labyrinths for walking meditation. The pattern now rests in courtyards and therapy gardens, where grief moves as slowly as necessary and the turns grant permission to think out loud. Tattoos place labyrinths on skin as vows to keep walking, or talismans against panic. Logos and book covers steal the strength of the spiral, promising complexity that can be navigated. We pretend we have turned the symbol into a lifestyle accessory, but the deeper truth is that the symbol has turned us into a story about endurance. If this journey is pulling you deeper, if you can feel the thread between your fingers, follow it with us. Subscribe, leave a mark, share this with someone who is still searching for the center. We walk these corridors week after week, decoding the things that refuse to die, and your presence is one more light along the way. Another way to enter the labyrinth is through numbers. The classical labyrinth often has 7 circuits, and 7 is an old, stubborn rhythm: days, heavens, seals, hills. The Chartres labyrinth's 11 circuits are their own sermon, an odd number that resists symmetry, a pilgrimage that refuses to be split neatly in half. Step counts become a liturgy. In some traditions, you didn't walk the labyrinth in a straight, unbroken line, but paused at intervals to read, sing, or shoulder a burden forward. The geometry teaches patience, and patience teaches humility, and humility opens a door that intelligence often misses. Writers fold the labyrinth into language. Thomas, the apocryphal whisperer, says the kingdom is within and without, but men do not see it. You can read that as the shape of a labyrinth. The center is both interior and everywhere, present in each turn you take. Dante descends through circles and climbs terraces like a pilgrim of spirals. Even those who never mention the labyrinth explicitly borrow its logic, organizing chapters around returns and revelations, staging encounters at the edges of the circle. Detective stories begin with murder and end at the same house by a different door. Science fictions send explorers into ship corridors that are not corridors at all, but moral problems in disguise. The architecture of narrative is often a labyrinth with all the lights on. Some interpretations look cruelly straightforward. The labyrinth is patriarchy punishing itself, or it is empire in denial, or it is a metaphor for bureaucracy, all true in their way, and yet incomplete. The symbol resists a single moral because it predates morality as a debate. It is a spatial practice invented by bodies and minds in collaboration. Walk it, and even without believing anything, you will feel the outer world loosen a little. The curved path forces you to give up the illusion of straight-line destiny. You must turn your back on your goal repeatedly as you approach it. This is either torment or training, and very often both. There are labyrinths we should refuse. There are deliberately confusing systems that keep people lost to benefit those who hold the maps. There are spaces designed to humiliate, with rules that change mid-journey. These are not the sacred labyrinth, but the predatory maze. How do we tell the difference? The true labyrinth offers one path and does not lie about where it leads. You can check the plan. You can lay a finger on the line and trace it to the center and back. The predatory maze pretends to be a labyrinth. It tells you there is a single route and then punishes you for believing it. In such a space, the Ariadne thread becomes a whistle you blow to call others to help redraw the walls. There is a story told by those who study patterns about how the labyrinth teaches memory. When you walk and do not decide, when you move and do not compete, you begin to notice details other anxieties usually erase. The way the air changes as you approach the center, a different smell of stone, the muscle memory of a turn you have taken before. This is why labyrinths suit grief. Grief cannot be solved by intelligence. It can only be hosted until it decides to leave. The labyrinth provides a host's backbone, a ritual of moving forward when the world has narrowed to a single sentence in the present tense. The rhythm is the therapy. And yet, the labyrinth is not just therapy. It is also an invitation to mischief. Children run it like a game of tag with an invisible partner. Lovers trace it with joined hands and forget who suggested this strange, slow dance. Some villages once played ball on the labyrinth's path at Easter, laughter bending around the curves like wind. The symbol tolerates our playfulness and seems to grow stronger for it. A sign that survives is not brittle. It flexes. So what does the labyrinth mean after all these miles? Historians will tell you origins: Minoan courts, Egyptian halls of rumor, Mediterranean coins, Scandinavian stones, desert baskets. Mystics will tell you functions: a substitute Jerusalem, a walking prayer, a deliberate simplicity. Philosophers will say the center is a question. Psychologists will say the Minotaur is your shadow, and Ariadne is the part of you that won't abandon you. Designers will tell you it calms a lobby. Directors will show you snow settling into a hedge and breath fogging in terror. All of them are correct because the labyrinth is not a single thesis. It is a practice that converts time into insight. And if you are looking for yourself in all of this, remember that the building is not the test. You are. The way you enter matters. The way you carry the thread matters. Some people run and hurl themselves laughing onto the center stone. Some weep so quietly, only the floor knows. Some circle 3 times before stepping inside, as if courting a shy animal. The labyrinth is a space that listens and replies without words. It keeps your secret and gives you back a rumor of who you might be when the world is too noisy. My favorite use of the labyrinth is also the least dramatic. Late afternoon light, a small garden maze set into brick, a woman with grocery lists and a grieving heart who decides to walk it once before going home. Her steps fall into the cadence of the path. She stops once to tighten a shoelace. At the center, she closes her eyes, does not pray, does not think, and then turns and follows the same line back out, noticing new things she didn't on the way in. Nothing miraculous, except that she returns carrying herself a fraction differently. She has proven something small and real to herself. I can move forward even when forward looks like sideways. That proof is a kind of thread she will carry into a week that does not care about metaphors. The labyrinth does not promise answers. It offers a rehearsal for circumstances where answers will not help. When the road curves unexpectedly, when the plan you made spirals out of reach, when the person you loved becomes a stranger, you are already inside a labyrinth whether you chose it or not. Learning to walk with attention, to turn without panic, to trust that the center is not an empty joke, becomes a form of resilience. The thread becomes a habit. Leave yourself a line back to kindness. And if you still crave the older thrill, picture the old stones of Knossos at dusk, the walls still holding the heat of the day, the goat bells far off like laughter. You can almost hear the footfalls of someone who practiced the art of turning in time with what was hunting him. He was not chosen because he could kill a bull-headed man. He was chosen because he could hold a thread without breaking it. The Minotaur was a riddle about what we feed in the dark, and that riddle still eats. But the labyrinth, when you understand it, is not a prison. It is a mirror. Whatever you carry into it becomes the beast at the center. Whatever you carry out becomes your guide. The floor will not move. The walls will not explain themselves. The thread is waiting. You know what to do.